Okay, so I hope this works. So we've had our first class, and now I thought I would send, my plan is to send a short recording that before each class, hopefully 24 hours before, and just explain to you how the class is going, how one assignment leads to the next, and then anticipate some of the questions that I'm going to talk about. But mainly, you have to bring the things that you want to talk about, but I will mention things that are of interest to me. Also, why I assigned the different chapters in the order that I did, and how they all fit back with the original theme. So today, it'll be a little longer, but at a certain point, I'll tell you, you can stop listening now because this is completely optional. Your assignment is to read the first 2 chapters in the book I wrote about using the ancient Greek goddesses to create a well-lived life for women. And it's the introductory section and then chapter 1. So the introduction just talks about the 7 goddesses and the passions that they represent. And I think you talked about this in your groups last time, but if you didn't get around to it, if you ended up talking about something else, you can think about all of these are sacred. They're all important, and you can do them all really well or really poorly. You could be corrupt, or you can be sincere. You can develop skill and be successful, but you could also be well-intentioned and make mistakes. Well, you will. That's kind of par for the course. But Athena represents the goddess of justice. She's the one that wants to become a lawyer or a politician or a judge, or she wants to start an organization to help promote some social justice cause. Like an Athena type would start an organization to stop the abuse of women, or to stop early marriages, arranged marriages for underage girls, or any kind of Athena. That passion would be the passion to overcome injustices that someone is experiencing. And in this class, we'll emphasize women. So a woman that wants to help other women in their search for justice and in creating a better society. Artemis is someone who's passionate about the natural world or about animals. Okay, Artemis, and you can think, is this something that you are really passionate about? The Humane Society, protecting abused animals, or sports, you're competitive, or just the preservation of the natural world. You're really big into environmentalism. And there are clubs at each of the schools, the liberal arts schools, for people to realize those passions. Demeter is the mother. She's passionate about children, just likes to be around them, take care of them, guide them. Hera is the wife who wants to be married to a powerful man or a wealthy man, so she doesn't have to get a job, but she would run the community. She would do a whole lot of volunteer work, or she would organize charity balls, or work on a library board, or a hospital board. I don't know in the other countries what you have, but every country would have different sorts of social networks where the wife of the more powerful men in town just do things to create a higher quality of life. And then there's Persephone, the one that got abused or wounded. And those women often help other women with their sorrow, with their grief, with their wounds. And they're very important. And then, let's see, Aphrodite is the goddess of beauty, but she's actually, she inspires people to create works of art or to create their lives. She's an inspiration. And an Aphrodite woman should inspire other women. She's not just a sex object for men. And then Hestia is the contemplative one. So what I talk about in my book is that that's the type that I am, but it's not a very common type. So when each goddess, when Jean Bolin describes them and their kind of life trajectory, and then I compare it to myself just to show the reader what they need to be doing. The advantage is that very few readers will identify with me, and so they won't want to be like me. I don't want them to be like me. They have to just figure out how to be like themselves, right? How to be yourself. So, but that it's because of that passion that I was always reflecting on my experiences in life. And then I started to recognize, oh, this isn't just about me. It's a pattern. Like this is something everybody goes through. When I had my children, well, when people fall in love, they just think, oh my God, nobody's felt this way before. Well, as a matter of fact, they have. Or they have children, they're completely in love with their children. So nobody's loved their children. Oh, yes, they have. So if you can understand, oh my gosh, every mother loves their kid as much as I do. And that's why social justice is so important. It's such a horrible wound if you know your child is going to be mistreated because of their race or their religion. That's so painful to a mother. And so we all ought to be working to create a better world so that our children don't get wounded like that. So another thing that I talk about in chapter 1 is that in the Western world, and we keep passing it on to the rest of the world, we split religion from science and from reason. And that was a mistake. And so a lot of you grew up in religious backgrounds. And so the way I teach world philosophies is just to unite reason and faith. The particular religion here is more like art. Nobody takes the goddesses literally, right? So we don't think of it as a religion, but it's a kind of art that has a lot of the same themes: justice and injustice, good and evil, how to create a better world, pass on a better world to the next generation. So I want you to think of the content of this class. You can bring in your religious background and see how the patterns in the virtues and the way of life really fit, hopefully, with what you got taught in the name of God. Now you can just open that up a bit and have these images of a whole lot of deities, and they each represent a kind of energy. So you can try to figure out how to unite science, wisdom, knowledge, religion, and social science. And I know all of you take all these classes, that's liberal arts. So that's what you want to do, is figure out how to synthesize them all. Let's see, another issue is synchronicity. If you've had an experience where meaningful coincidences, like a lot of things come together and you just have these sort of aha reactions, Sometimes there's positive synchronicity. It just moves you forward. Sometimes it's negative. So right now during COVID, obviously it's negative, except that within that negativity, there's a lot of positive things that happen. People figure out what they really care about. People get a vision moving forward of what they want to do to make the world a better place. So you can think about the COVID era as this huge negative experience, but try to think about it. The image is the phoenix rising up from the ashes. Most people's sense of mission and purpose comes from having suffered in some way, and then getting this real conviction about what's worthwhile. Usually that's because of an obstacle or because of something a friend has experienced, some real trauma, some real problem. So I think you should think of it that way. Like, what is this COVID experience motivating me to do to make the world a better place? How has it stripped me of all the superficial stuff and got me really focused on what is life? What is a well-lived life? And then, as I said last time, we all, as women, really are creating a different culture. And by the time you're my age, your culture will really be different and for women. And so I want you to be part of that and be deliberate about it. Just be very aware that you can be a leader in this creation of a new culture. We're also going to have a global culture that's much more green, environmentally friendly. By the time you're my age, either we're going to be we're going to have gone green, or we'll all be dead. So you have to look forward to that. Be prepared for change, embrace change, because change is necessary and it's generally to your advantage as a woman who's getting a college degree. And then another thing women have done is to find role models. So women have always had to juggle independence and then marriage, family, and career. It's always been a struggle. It's still a struggle for women. And so I'll talk to you about my own struggle in a second. But usually women scholars have gone back and read history, and they found out, and that's what I'm asking you to do when we talk about each of the goddesses. You find a woman in the public eye or in your family. So we're literally creating a woman's history, and we're finding role models. We're also finding the way that women suffer in silence, and we're bringing out all this suffering that women have gone through, and we're speaking it, and we're getting people to think differently about what the world is actually like, what it always has been and what it is now, and how we can make it better. So with that in mind, I just want you to read the material, come with 3 questions or issues. I'll bring up these other issues, and I like the fact the classes are longer than they are at Lion, and we just have time to talk about life. What is a well-lived life? So with that, you can shut down your computer now if you want to. For the rest of the time, I want to just explain how I ran into so many obstacles. I think I referred to that. But I thought that I would just, and it always takes longer than I wish it would, but it's the story of a bird cage, of You keep running into obstacles until all of a sudden you realize you're stuck. And that happened to me, and I don't want it to happen to you. So I will just try to tell the story and try not to make it too long. And you don't have to listen, but it's just given that I come from this incredibly wealthy country, I have natural ability. I have motivation. My parents really valued education. They weren't strict, but they just, you know, they're always active. They're always doing things they like. It was just natural to be motivated. And then opportunity. They made sacrifices compared to other parents so that their children could go to a really good liberal arts college. So liberal arts college is really important to me. My husband and I made sacrifices so our children could go to good liberal arts colleges, because that's the place where you leave home, you don't live by habit and imitation, and you start to really think about, how do I want to live and why? What do I like about what my parents did? What don't I like? What is it my parents gave me, and what couldn't they give me because they don't know the world that I'm going to be an adult in? They gave me as much as they could, and then they have to let you go. So that's liberal arts, and that was just a huge value in my home. But so what happened was, it started in adolescence. I was a good student, but I was just a squirrely kid. I was like everybody else. I had this girlfriend in 7th and 8th grade, and I was very obnoxious, but I grew out of it. My father marched in Selma, Alabama, as I said, when I was 10. And so this seed was planted in the back of my head, and the civil rights movement. And then in 9th grade, Martin Luther King got shot when I was having my birthday party. It was the day after my birthday. And there were huge riots at the Democratic National Convention. And there was this huge controversy politically between two Democratic candidates. One of them, his political center was 8 miles from my house. So it was really a big deal when I was in high school. So then I started worrying about justice. And that was when boys didn't like me anymore. Like, boys liked me when I was superficial. But then when I started to get serious, they didn't. And I was at first shocked because my dad liked me a lot better. But that was like the beginning, you know, that you're better when you're cutesy and you flirt and all that. But I just ignored it. Go on. Then I had a crush on the boy next door. So the big issue for women is also when you marry and when you have children. If you have them when you're younger, you really can get into trouble because the society will just expect things of you and keep you down so that you take care of your babies. And that's just a huge problem still in the US. So what happened to me is that I married the boy next door when I was 20 because I'd known him since I was 10, and his dad was a philosophy professor, friends of my parents. My mother was an art history professor. My dad was a minister. We all went to the same church. And his mother was an open school teacher. We all went to that school. And my brother, he was my brother's best friend. So I just figured, I'm just going to marry my friend. And then, okay, here's when it starts. The IUD companies, I was using a birth control, and they were lying about their product. So I thought it was 97% effective, and I got pregnant in 10 weeks. So on my 21st birthday, the day after my 21st birthday, I found out I was pregnant. And I'd been married like 3 months. So that was the beginning of things getting tough. My parents supported me and I finished college. So my daughter was 7 months old when I finished, and I took another year off to apply for grad school, and then I went to grad school. But they didn't have housing for a family. They had housing if you were single. So I had to work for a widower and his 2 kids, um, and babysit for them while I had my own kid. And I only went to grad school part-time. I had to learn German, I had to learn Greek. So I was juggling. And then I was using another kind of IUD. It was called copper 7. And the doctor said, this is totally different. It's a different principle. And then I started getting terrible infections, and nobody told me it was caused by the copper 7. And I really got sick. And so finally they took it out. Actually, I had one in for 2 years, got it replaced. This next one. And so finally somebody figured out maybe we should take that out, but I had no, I didn't know that was the problem. So then I wasn't using birth control for a couple months, and I was trying to do the rhythm method. I don't know if you all, and then I got pregnant again. And so my son was born about 4 years after my daughter. And again, that was nice for a family, but we were juggling housing. We ended up living in the ghetto of Philadelphia. We didn't have a car. I had to walk with my daughter. We lived with other people in their house, and they were nasty people, and we had to leave. And then finally we got a little row house, and I could walk the kids. We didn't have a car. I could walk the kids to their various schools or whatever. And still, I'm trying to get through grad school, but I figured if you're studying Plato, it doesn't really, it's not like a big time thing. The research on Plato isn't going to change every few months. So I just went part-time, and I'm struggling along. Well, then at a certain point, oh yeah, the IUDs didn't work, right? So now I have to figure out what to use. And the birth control pills wouldn't work for me because you have to remember, and I don't have a good memory. Plus, they had twice as much estrogen at that time. And so there were a lot of side effects. And between that, I knew a woman who forgot one pill and she had twins. I'm like, no, that's not going to work for me. So I used a diaphragm. I used it faithfully, but you were supposed to use it with some jelly. I didn't use the jelly twice, and then I got pregnant again. So neither my husband or I had a job when I got pregnant for the 3rd time, and because he was studying to become a computer programmer. So before that, he'd just been worked on the grounds crew, and we were living on a pretty low wage. So then he became a computer programmer, and I at a hospital. And so I had my baby, my 3rd one, at that hospital where he was working. So now I have 3 kids, and then I got a job back in Minnesota, back near all the kids' grandparents. And that was great, to get a job back home. And I had all but dissertation. I had taken my Ph.D. exams. I had passed my exams in Greek and German. I just slowly, year by year, summer by summer, did all this stuff. I wrote my master's degree, and 3 weeks later, my son was born. And I took my PhD exams, and 2 weeks later, my youngest daughter was born. So it was pretty crazy. So then I moved to Minnesota, and I taught for a year, and I had an advisor, and I was supposed to be working on my dissertation, but he just didn't get back to me. He I hadn't met him. The woman I had been working with left the profession, and so he was replacement, but he didn't get back to me. And then he became kind of hostile for no reason, you know? And I was 1,000 miles away, so there's not a lot I could do about it. But anyway, so then I got this job for a year, but then someone else filed a complaint, so I lost that job. And then, and then I got a part-time job, and that was okay because I needed to finish my dissertation. So I had this part-time job, but then they insisted that I finish within the certain time limit. And I was trying, but my youngest daughter, she was pre-kindergarten. I think she was 4 in November, and she went into this pre-kindergarten program that my son had been in. And when I went to the teacher conference, the teacher said, I can't believe these two children are from the same family, because your son is confident and bright and wonderful, and your daughter, like, she sits in a corner and sucks her thumb, and she's just doesn't have any confidence. So I knew, you know, the reason is because I'm under way too much stress. And so then I wrote a letter asking them if I could have an extension, because my dissertation was supposed to be done right when she was in kindergarten. And so that it's when she's in first grade and she's in school all day, that's when I can finish it. So I asked for a 3-year extension. And the school I was at was a real feminist school. It was pro-feminist, all women. And they said no. And she said, I'm so proud of you for choosing your family over your career. So now I'm 29 years old. I have 3 kids, and I have nothing career-wise, nothing after working all that time. So then I just became a mom for a while. I just said, I can't handle it, you know, forget it. I don't know at all what my future is going to be, but I've just got to take care of these kids. And so after 2 years, 3 years, I applied to the University of Minnesota in philosophy, and I got in, and I had a draft of my dissertation, and I gave it to the woman there, and she had studied with the absolutely best Plato scholars in the world. She studied at Princeton and at Oxford. So she had much better credentials than the people back at the school I was in grad school with. But I had to take a logic class, second order predicate logic. It was really abstract. So I was teaching full time. I had kids at home, 2 or 3 kids at home. And I'm trying to take this logic class. And I had to get a B, and I got a C plus. And so I told the woman who I'd given my manuscript to that I couldn't finish the program. I didn't get a good enough grade. Well, she looked at my manuscript and said, you've already written a dissertation. So now this woman who's studied with the best people in the world has told me I have written a dissertation on Plato. And so I should have been given the degree a long time ago. But what she said is, just call up your school and tell them that I will work with you, and you can just finish that degree at the school you originally went to. So we did. She called them, and they called me back, and they were so hostile. They were so mean. They said, we decided to let you in. We thought we told you you couldn't do philosophy, but I guess you didn't hear. And, you know, this is a woman who studied at Oxford and Princeton, Plato. Boy, they were nasty. But anyway, then I found out why, because a few months later, I found out there was a lawsuit against a woman at Vassar College who sued the school for discrimination against women with children. And then I found out that giving some graduate students housing and not giving others is against the law. And that's what they were doing. If you were single, they had housing for you, but they didn't have housing for me. And it was a huge problem. So they knew they would have a lawsuit. And that's the only reason they let me back in. So anyway, I did get my degree. And then, but 8 months before I was going to finish my degree, my husband just blew up the marriage, basically. But he started telling me stuff that this marriage was not going to last. But I didn't, we kept it, you know, we just had to keep it together until I finished my dissertation. And then after that, I tried to fix the marriage, but he really wasn't interested in fixing it. And so I did ask him to move out. And so that was devastating for the children. So my youngest one was going into 7th grade when he moved out, which is really a hard time for a kid, you know, 7th grade, adolescence, it was terrible. But anyway, so my one daughter was already in college and the other one was going into 11th grade, and he moved out. And then about 15 months later, I found out I wasn't going to have my job anymore, because not because I didn't do a good job, but because there was they needed somebody in a different field, and so they had to let me go. So I looked for a job for 15 months, and I finally found one that was 1,000 kilometers away from where we'd been living. And so now my youngest daughter had to decide who she was going to live with. Her dad back in Minnesota where she grew up, or me. And all her grandparents lived in Minnesota near her, and her aunts and uncles. And so basically I moved there alone. And so that's how I started my career in a tenure track in philosophy, as I was all alone after I'd been raising kids for 20 years. Then I found out the people who hired me were empire builders. They were George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, guys who wanted America to control the world economically, and I didn't know that. So they hired me thinking that I thought like them, and when they found out I didn't, they tried to get rid of me. So at my 3-year review, they were really hostile, and they said it wasn't good enough. Nothing I did was good enough. So that was really scary. I mean, but I just worked 80 hours a week. I just worked all the time, and I cried about 3 hours a day, and then the rest was working and I couldn't sleep. But anyway, so then 1 year before I came up for tenure, they left. Both of the people who were out to get me left. And then I published a book and an article, and so I did get tenure. So I was 50 when I got tenure. And after that, I've had a very cushy life, because college professors, once they get tenure, they have so much more economic stability than anybody else in the world. So, you know, I've had a good life. I just, I'm very privileged. I just tell the story just so my students can understand, you know, that there's lots of ways that you're vulnerable, and try not to blame yourself. That was my problem. I kept blaming myself, like, I can fix the marriage, I can finish early, I can do this. No, you can't. It was impossible to do all that stuff. And so you have to not let the world get to you, basically, and don't blame yourself, because the world, male-dominated world, will want women to blame themselves. It's a lot easier that way for them. Plus, I never did get into the issue of criticizing other women, and I do think you have to be really careful about that. I was too isolated as a person to do that. But you do get in positions where you're always having to please men, and definitely philosophy is a male-dominated society, and I did have to please men. So since I've been 50, there's still sexism everywhere, but I'm not vulnerable, right? I'm not going to lose my job. I have enough income. My kids are through college. So it did life got easier, but sexism is just everywhere. And I do want my students to be savvy and to support each other a lot. So that's one way of telling the story. And when I teach women's issues, I teach it, okay, here's the patriarchal notion of masculinity and femininity, of marriage, of child raising, of education, healthcare, economics, politics, the arts, religion. And so all the way along, I had stories about how those different aspects of life were gendered, and I had these experiences. I mean, just to give one little example, I brought my son to the doctor once, and we were poor, and we were on ghetto health care in the middle of Philadelphia. And kids, when they're 1.5, they get pretty chunky before they start walking a lot. And he was on the table, and the doctor came in and looked at my son and said, "That's disgusting." Disgusting, right? Oh, God. Anyway, I mean, it's just that kind of stuff that partly because you're a woman, but partly because you're poor. It's just awful. But I did learn a lot about everything I experienced. I thought, well, what if I wasn't sort of naturally smart? What if I wasn't motivated? What if my parents didn't support me? What if I didn't have this education? What if I weren't white? What if I were poorer? Everything I experienced would be so much harder for other people. And so I did develop a lot of empathy, which again is why I want all of my students, I want you to know that I think about you. And I had enough experiences to know that most of you, all of you, have overcome so many more obstacles than I had at your age. And so I just wish the best for you, and I hope it all works out. Now I have to figure out how to how to stop recording, which, oh boy. And I'll just end.